A supposedly fun thing I'll never do again is David Foster Wallace's 1997 collection of essays. And it was probably one of his more well known nonfiction works. And it's definitely one of the ones that crossed my radar, I think, first. The other one was Consider the Lobster. But yeah, he has a host of different things, but the title one, probably the most famous one, I'm going to try to focus just on this one, because some of the other ones I did do, I think I mentioned a list of different. It might have been the Flesh and Blood or both Flesh and Not. I think. Sorry. But yeah, that was another essay thing that I went through all the kind of equally tried to distribute between all the essays on that one. But I'm just going to try to focus on his titular, a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again, ever do again. Um, I think he originally posted in a Harper's, I think it was. Yeah, because he did that. I think he wrote a bit for Vanity Fair, and then later, when a few years later, when McSweeney's was Dave Eggers McSweeney's, he was also he was featured in that as well. Yeah, so on the title essay, he's basically has been commissioned, kind of in a funny way, recounts his stay at the request of the magazine to kind of get his 2 cents. I guess they kind of realized, hey, let's get this young writer. Um, I don't know if this would have been before Infinite Jest or if he was kind of maybe in the middle of that at the time, but he ends up boarding on this Caribbean, this all-encompassing kind of super luxurious trip to as to Caribbean, across. Well, I'm sorry, the MF. I think it was called the MV Zenith, which Wallace kind of jokingly kind of reposts as being referring to as the Nader, the MV Nader. And yeah, according to the MV Nader, that was only kind of new at the time, because I think it was only christened 5 years old earlier in the early 90s. So yeah, so he's the whole essay kind of revolves around his discomfort with the sheer amount of how comfortable it was supposed to be. The entire like experience on the cruise ship, you would expect to be, at least for most of us, I guess, mine not included. I know I'd probably lose my mind. Not being a fan of kind of garish things or lighting or body things or tiki torches or anything like that, or Margaritaville. The second I hear that Jimmy Buffett, any of that kind of island escapism, I think it's called. I want to be 1,000,000,000 miles away from. Not that I don't like traveling. I mean, I do have a spot for traveling. As I might have mentioned, but yeah, this cruise ships are an special. I've never been on one, so I'm not talking from experience. Fortunately, I guess. Um, unless I suddenly had a huge change of heart, I don't think I would really enjoy it. But Wallace goes into the kind of exact, the odd kind of, the more something's tried to be forced. So the comfort, he is the more of that kind of luxury and like ease of act. Everything's just so easy, and you just relax, and it's just like have a good time. But for him, it's like the the fact is that the more they try to force that on him, the less comfortable he would be. So there would be instances where at every other moment, like just doing the most mundane things, like there would be a poker table, there'd be, I think, people watching live music and like bands, and all the bands kind of played the same kind of, I don't know what you call it, tiki music, or the same kind of steel marimba kind of like repetitive kind of stuff that's all meant to be the same vein, and meant to be what's like maudlin. It's meant to be sappy on purpose. It's meant, so Wallace is talks about how there's like at the end of every time he walks back to his room, or from like to and from one place incrementally, always there's somebody unflailingly offering him a towel or offering him a thing or offering, and they do this with such alacrity and like such remind me of Jean-Paul Sartre's the bad faith of the waiter or the waitress who is so kind of fidgety and they're acting as if they were a waiter first rather than a person, a human being. So this kind of remind me, what I'm not sure if he went into the kind of existential kind of dilemma of it, but he hints at it kind of. With this kind of person where they're so, it's like happiness or other someone else's, like in the service industry, and that's kind of, I've had little ins and outs with little tiny little jobs here and there that I short-lived, just kind of teenage jobs in the service industry. And I also found that the kind of face you have to constantly feel that you have to put on, it's false and it's facile. It's coming from like a place of more like, this is just the professional kind of way of carrying yourself. So when that it's like it's like the idea is painted out that this is the level of fun you should be having. You should be having the maximum level of fun. So yeah, so it's really that kind of aspect, like someone at every at the end of every avenue offering him a towel or offering him something that gets to him, that makes him question why he even went on there in the first place. So he's on there for a week, and he's there's television, there's entertainment. We all know Wallace has his relationship with that kind of those kind of gadgets and stuff that of excessive kind of his his own kind of addictions to it as well, of constantly having to combat the temptation to like just kind of vegetate and sit and watch, like when there's so many damn channels. So this is a similar kind of thing where there's, instead of just televisions and looking, you go back in your room and you can be comfortable in there, or you can walk around the cruise ship and kind of lightly socialize with the other people who are there for the same reason. And but yeah, but I think the more you think about it, and that's in his case, the more he felt this kind of angst about the situation, because he's like, wait a second, why, if I'm not having this much fun, is there something wrong with me, or is it wrong with the standard that these other people are enforcing? Because it's clearly everybody else is having fun, and I've had personal experiences or similar experiences myself, of people just seeming to have so much, enjoying themselves so much at jobs that I hated. Even though, but maybe it's just because maybe they're much more kind of into the moment, or into, they don't think, or maybe they repress thinking, or maybe they do think, or maybe they're just wearing a bigger mask than I am. Whatever it is, it definitely makes you think kind of the implications of these kinds of, the mentality of, the service of anything, or, trying to customer satisfaction, the customers are you right. But for him, that was the biggest challenge. It was trudging through these days and how long it felt, and how just like this overwhelming kind of despair would come out of it. Because once he internalized all these thoughts and stuff, and like was thinking like, why is this happening? Once you kind of have different levels of thinking engaged with that kind of stuff, I'm not trying to say that that makes you a greater person, because it also can, in some ways, it can kind of turn you into, kind of numb you to outer experiences. So it's not as if this is the way to go. Be like exactly like what Wallace was going, because he couldn't help it a lot of the time. He was kind of inculcated with this kind of a grammarian at heart, and kind of a mathematical kind of mind, who was prone to logic, but also introspection on a humanistic level as well too. Like he had a pretty cohesive blend of all these different talents for, and that's what, it's no wonder that he got an MFA in creative fiction, because that kind of, you can kind of meld all those things at once. You can engage with philosophy, but not also be totally answerable to everything, to all the epistemology, I suppose, of of being totally right or having to completely 100% abide in all the principles and stuff. You can be right. I mean, you can be wrong. You can have a margin of error, with creative fiction. So, and you can also do other things like you can engage in mathematics without having to be, Kurt Gödel or. So that was kind of interesting. So the other essays on this were in order of chronological order were Derivative Spot in Tornado Alley, which that one's he's talking about like tennis, trigonometry and tornadoes. That's the other, I think, title. And he's talking about kind of just a account of his own early days of living out in the Midwest and his interests in mathematics and tennis, and obviously the titular things that were mentioned there. Tennis is obviously a big thing that shows up again and again. So like he talked about Roger Federer in other essays as well. So yeah, E Unibus Plurim, television and U.S. fiction. That's probably one of his most well-known ones, I think, or probably well-respected essays. And he goes into kind of into the very kind of essence of like maybe truth and reality of what fiction writers, I think in this one he was talking about, were kind of like oglers. I think they were the kind of people that you see at a subway that are kind of giving you a weird look, I believe, like just kind of observant and but almost to an unsettling degree. And yeah, and how television can kind of I think he was talking about how television can, it's been a while since I've read these, but I think he was talking about how TV can take away that, because of the immediacy of it and the accessibility of being an ogler, not amongst kind of people, but now everything you want is at your leisure and your comfort. Again, it kind of ties into the cruise ship. But yeah, he's talking about the how TV and entertainment in general can kind of kill creativity, I think, because for fiction, I think it requires you to have an open mind and to keep to kind of, but with that there's always like it's kind of a closed system with television, like things have been already made up for you. So getting away with already being pretty much away from it all. So that was also called A Ticket to the Fair. This was Wallace's account of the 1993 Illinois State Fair, and he was talking about all the different kind of interesting kind of activities taking place there, like from random people like guessing how much you weighed or how tall you were, and somehow getting a little maybe pittance, but it was kind of an interesting kind of thing that you would get paid for that anyway. But also to also baton twirling axe. I'm sorry, wow, butchered that. And how it was very much, all these 4-H kind of things were kind of in his consciousness of the Midwestern culture, and he talked about that, growing up in the Midwest, and for me personally too, I identified with that, having not necessarily gone to a lot of 4-H meetings or a lot of like farmers but having lived next to a farm and pretty much virtually kind of in a farm like area too. I've although it's more so up here in Pennsylvania, it's more like long, like rural, but like a lot very hilly, where it's like jagged loops and vales and hills that are a pain to drive around because you're blind spot, and the deer too is just painful. But yeah, but with the Midwest, it's just like one flat land, and but still a lot of farms there. Anyway, so but yeah, he was talking about kind of the interesting kind of kitsch, I guess, value of state fairs, and just like how much everybody's trying to sell you something. Anyway, so greatly exaggerated. And he's talking about this book by Harvey Lee Hicks, who I think it's called Morte the Author, I think it was An Autopsy. And he's talking about, this wasn't the one that he was talking about, John Updike. I think that was in Considered Lobster, but which I'll try to do soon. But anyway, but David Lynch keeps his head, which he was talking about his experience, talking about Lynch and his fandom. His glaringly obviously fandom. He talked to Charlie Rose about being a fan of right from the start. I think in this essay too that he talked about how Lynch was really influential with his Blue Velvet in 84 or 86, I think it came out, and that Wallace, being a student at the time, I think was talking about seeing that and how that kind of changed the frontier, I guess, of his creative thinking. And he's like, oh, I can do this. This is one way of doing art, I guess. And but then he talked about kind of the interesting kind of idiosyncrasies of Lynch, like how the man himself like kind of talks and communicates, and how he talks like kind of like using weird kind of, I don't know if he said like this, but like I can definitely imagine it just from seeing some interviews with David Lynch being like, oh, groovy, like, yes, and transcendental meditation, it makes you think like ideas are like fish, and the biggest fish gets the, like they'll come down to you when you need it. And that's pretty much how he sees this guy, and he's like not sure, because he's like he do like the way he dresses, he's like he has the insane kind of cerebral output, and the content he's made is like that you would expect of like this like very brooding guy who's just like, I hate everybody, I hate the world, or but then when you see him, he's just like very like professional and amiable, and just kind of like a little bit nerdy, I guess. He's just like, oh, I'm just a guy from all the way out, and I don't know if he's from I think he's from Washington, I think. So he's like not quite that Midwest kind of thing, but he is a similar kind of thing with that kind of his amiability. Like, I guess that might be the meditation too, kind of. But yeah, he talks about like not just worshiping Lynch, but talking about his kind of certain maybe things that he could do better, or like certain downfalls and certain things, and like he doesn't do everything perfect. He's sometimes his movies are a little bit lost too much in the dream world, I guess. It's just me saying this. But yeah, so she's talking about tennis player, Michael Joyce's professional artistry as a paradigm of certain stuff, about choice, freedom, discipline, and the grotesque, and human completeness. Wow. That was the essay. Wow, the entire title. So this, he also titled Strength Theory. He was talking about, again, for a tennis-related thing that I can't quite remember, but it had something to do with one of the Canadian Opens, I believe. And, I think he talked about, is this the one he talked about how, no, that was a different one, how so-and-so broke my heart, Tracy Austin, I think, and he talks about that, but that's considered lobster, I believe. Getting ahead of myself here. And then supposedly fun thing, I'll do it again, is the last one. Anyway, so that was a little bit longer than I thought. I didn't quite expect to kind of had a little bit more kind of opinions there than I thought, but yeah, I'm gonna wrap this up right about now. That is a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again by David Foster Wallace, and thanks for watching.